failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to episode 361 of the Physical Performance Show, proudly brought to you by Pogo Physio's online telehealth consultations, designed to help you get back to your physical best following injury. I'm Brad Beer, sports and exercise physiotherapist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Now, up until last year, we were bringing you a weekly dose of the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your physical best. However, I am halfway through a 2.5-year registrar training program with the Australian College of Physiotherapists, pursuing specialisation in the sports and exercise physiotherapy stream. As a result, my recording wings have been mostly clipped. However, every now and then, I'll aim to sneak an episode, including today's, with esteemed guest, Associate Professor David Butler. Now, professionally, David Butler is a giant in the physiotherapy space. David has been a witness and an instigator of the treatment of pain since the mid-80s, with a professional life that has mixed the clinic, research and teaching. David is the director of the Neuro Orthopedic Institute, which runs countless biopsychosocially-based seminars per year around the world, teaching practitioners and patients alike all about pain. David is the author of Mobilization of the Nervous System, the Sensitive Nervous System, and co-author of the Bible, if you like, of pain science education, Explain Pain, released in 2013, and then again revised in 2013. In addition, David has also authored the Graded Motor Imagery Handbook, the Explain Pain Handbook Protectometer, and in 2017, Explain Pain Supercharged. More recently, in 2024, David has partnered with Tasha Stanton and Lorimer Mosley to release the Knee Osteoarthritis Handbook. David is an honoured member of the Australian Physiotherapy Association and an adjunct associate professor at the University of South Australia. It's estimated that David has taught in excess of 50,000 health practitioners worldwide through the NOI Group and his materials. And on today's episode, which we have titled Explaining Pain, David explores the what, the why, and the how of pain. We all experience it, but how does it happen and what does it mean to our health and well-being? We all know people who have struggled with pain that may have become persistent, and we've seen, no doubt, the limitations that persistent pain experiences can have on individuals. So whether you are a health practitioner or fitness enthusiast alike, there is something in this expert edition for everyone. Here is my conversation with Associate Professor David Butler, explaining pain. Associate Professor David Butler, this is a real professional thrill for myself. I ran into you at the 2023 Australian Physio Conference and in Brisbane, and it took me back to my undergraduate years where we were learning about the works of yourself and your colleagues, and to have this opportunity today is a real thrill. So welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
Brad, thank you. It's really, really good to be here.
David, we're titling this episode, this expert edition, Explaining Pain. This is a big topic. In 2023, yourself and your well-esteemed colleague, Lorimer Mosley, released one of my favourite books. You cannot find a more beautiful book than Explain Pain, and I've got the revised edition as well. But we've just celebrated, what was it, the 20th anniversary of the publication?
Yes, 20th anniversary. Yeah.
The 20th anniversary, and it lives on. We've titled this expert edition Explaining Pain, not to be mistaken with the seminal piece Explain Pain. But the aim of getting you on, David, was it's a topic we haven't explored yet over 360 episodes of this show. And I thought, who better to give us a bit of a working insight into this concept of pain? It's a big topic. Sure. So where should we start, David? What is pain?
Oh, gosh. Brad, it's a really good question. If I'm sure for many of your listeners, I'd say, oh, it's just bloody well hurts. You could go to all the fancy organizations, International Association for the Study of Pain, and they'll give you a definition. But The one that I use and my colleague Mosley uses, and the one that is used in a lot of research work today, and a lot of our patients and clients have benefited from, is that pain is something that's constructed in our body, and it's constructed when our brains kind of weigh the world and perceive what's going on out there, and there's some judgment, if I can use that word, that there's more danger out there than safety. So the key things, it's made, the brain is the big key thing, of course, but it's made within our whole body and in relation to where we are in our own world. So it's a big, complex production. It's good for us. We need a pain system. And most people say, I want to get rid of this thing, but it is a very powerful protective device. And we know that, Brad, because that very small proportion of people in the world who are born without the ability to perceive pain usually don't last that long. They can't report an infected appendix or something like that. So a protective device that our brains construct in response to how we weigh and judge the world around us. And maybe just one example, it can be tricky. Of course, if you run across the road and you've sprained your ankle in the middle of the road, you're not going to turn pain on then. You'll get to the other side of the road. Or somebody running a marathon might have something towards the end of the marathon. Well, they're not going to stop. They would go on and complete it. So it's a complex thing, because it's almost when it's convenient to have pain that we humans produce it.
It's almost when it's convenient to have pain that we humans produce it.
Yeah, yes. You could argue it's quite convenient in a well-supported Western environment that it's quite okay to have pain, but I'm pretty sure in other environments where there's not the same sort of support, there may not be as much pain. So already we've delved into this thing. It's really quite complex.
Yes. And, that last comment you made there, David, immediately, as a practitioner of 17 years, makes me think about the context of pain.
That's true. And Brad, that pain experience, and for the listeners, we realize that the kind of pain, the amount of pain is very strongly driven by context. But what that says for us clinicians and for people in pain is that we need to use context to actually treat pain. So I'll just give you one example of exercise. An exercise program works better outside. The same exercise works better outside than inside a gym, right? The context is different. You're in there, you might be linking back to nature. There might be different sensory experiences out there. The context has changed. But I think you've hit on something really important early on in this talk. Context is critical, and it teaches us a lot about pain.
One of my favorite pages in Explain Pain, which is so beautifully illustrated. I don't own a more pretty book than Explain Pain on my bookshelf. I think it'll be hard to top. But one of my favorite couple of pages in here is the amazing pain stories, part 1, part 2, part 3. Can you just give an example of around the
You watch a game of soccer and somebody scores a goal and the whole team jumps on top of that person. Right? Do they get up? They get up and run around and play again, But someone, we could fall off a chair at a workplace or some horrible place where there's lots of poorer context, and it can actually hurt. If you put a pin prick in a violinist's finger, the one that strums the strings, that hurts more than if you put a pin in a dancer's finger. Huh?
Same pin.
Same pin. Context is important. If you do activities and show people sort of red lights, that often hurts more than the same activity when there's blue lights around. So it's important. And the key thing here, but it's not saying it's all in your head either. This pain, it's a body construction. There's always the body and the brain, which are all sort of one.
Body construction, the body and the brain, all sort of one.
All sort of one, yeah.
Ultimately, though, the brain has to weigh up, like you said there at the start, David, it has to weigh up, make a judgment on the situation, though.
It judges the situation, The brain weighs the world and judges the situation, and then pain may or may not emerge. But of course, Brad, we're getting quite complex here, because when somebody is up there judging the situation, and just say they've sprained their ankle, and there might have been an ankle sprain in the past, or there might have been a whole lot of other issues going on. An ankle sprain in the past, they might think, oh, God, I want to play sport on the weekend. Oh, have I really fractured it? Oh, my auntie had one of these and she had a lot of trouble. So there's a lot of things to weigh up as to whether pain's produced.
I had a 22-year-old fit, active male here on the Gold Coast in clinic last week, a competitive surfer. And an example of this, David, would be, I asked him, I think one of the seminal questions practitioners can ask, in your heart of hearts, what's your greatest concern about this situation? Deep in here, what are you most worried about? And he didn't mention his pain. He said, I'm worried that my friend I've just observed had back surgery and I'm worried I'll end up in the same way, same situation.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's very different to the problem being the pain. The problem is his concern. It's his judgment of what's happening, which is contextualized by his observation of his mate in this instance. It changed the whole consultation.
Absolutely. It's a great question, and all practitioners should ask a similar question.
David, the threat value of pain, if we're talking about this judgment, can you just speak to how we perceive the threat or the situation and how that plays out in the pain that we experience?
Yeah, I think we've covered that a little bit there. The notion of threat value. It's a word we've used in our books. I woke up this morning with a sore shoulder, Brad. I thought, oh, bloody shoulder. It's been bugging me for about 2 weeks. And I know what's gone on there. I did some crazy gardening, and I know that if I sleep on that shoulder, I'll wake up, it'll be a bit worse. All right. Now, there's no threat value at all in this situation. I know I've got full range of movement. I know it's going to move. I know what I've done. I've been able to reflect on where I've been with this journey, and I'm pretty sure it's going to ease. Yeah, look at me. I'm moving beautifully. Just driving me mad. It's clearly tissue-based pain. I don't think there's too much a change in my nervous system. So the threat value is particularly low, but the threat value of a pain or of can be particularly high for someone who's had, again, things like previous experiences, knows someone who's had a minor problem which has gone on to problems, hates needles, hates going to doctors. The threat value just simply soars. And of course, the clever clinicians and the clever clients, if they can begin to unpack that threat value, and I like the word unpack, what is there in that threat which is making me or another person produce so much pain?
Yeah.
I'm going to make this conversation even more complex, because it might not be pain. All right. You might be producing sweating or anxiety or stress or disgust. So this whole notion or fatigue, when we talk here about pain, of course, it's fairly similar to a lot of other things or feelings that our bodies produce, like anxiety, chronic fatigue, etc. So, and it's a message I always like to get out to the public, that the strategies here used for chronic COVID, post-COVID syndrome too, are very similar.
Really interesting. So the threat value can also be predicated by not just pain, but by anxiety, by fatigue.
Feelings of unwellness, or these feelings like anxiety can also be produced in response to a threat value.
Go the other way as well.
Go the other way as well too. Yeah. So I'm Brad. I'm getting a bit old, as you can see, and I'm really retired. But I see a few patients, and I probably see more people with chronic fatigue syndrome or chronic anxiety as I do chronic pain. But the treatment or some of the guidance, which we'll obviously come to later, is fairly similar for those groups.
Across those groups.
Yeah.
I work heavily, David, in sports physiotherapy, and I do a lot in the running population. And I recognize early, probably from my own personal experiences, that people don't tend to walk in the door of this practice or into my consultation room because they're concerned about their pain. Yep. But by gosh, they're having a hard time mentally often when they've, in many ways, with distance runners, lost some of their coping strategies in life. So the anxiety levels are high, the threat value is high to their well-being. And I don't attest to have all the skills, but I think I've found it helpful as a clinician to be able to at least identify and acknowledge that that's playing a big part in their presentation.
Absolutely, yeah.
And even just being able to address it, name it, recognize it, I think helps the patient.
That's right. Address it, name it, bring it to the surface, let the patient reflect on it. Yes.
So a bit of a construct here, David, like what types of pain are there?
Yeah.
The public would hear about chronic pain, and I think there's a lot of fear around that word. And it's a word I maybe rightly or wrongly have tried to move away from using in terms of clinic life. But what's just simply the difference between acute pain and this construct of chronic or persisting pain?
Yeah, well, probably the word persistent pain is a little better, I suppose, than chronic pain. Chronic pain is a really unpleasant sort of wording. The pain research groups and pain, they recognise three kinds of pain, essentially, which I think is probably a good step away from this acute and chronic. As you know, Brad, the definition of when something became chronic was when I think people had it for 3 months, which means that at 2 months, 30 days, 23 hours, you suddenly go chronic. So it's a bit crazy. So it's much better. There's pain like my shoulder this morning, which I would call like a nociceptive dominant pain. So the tissues, things at the end of the nerves are either inflamed or not enough blood or being squished or something. That's like a tissue dominant pain. Of course, there's always a brain attached. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we've always known there's some nasty but still quite treatable pain states like people might have after stroke or really severe nerve damage, some of the neurological injuries. But in the middle is what the scientists are calling nociplastic pain. And this is where it's kind of in the middle, but it's the nervous system is clearly involved. So some of the more widespread pain states, pains that just don't go away for a few months, fibromyalgia is another term called nociplastic pain. And this is where we clearly have scientific evidence that the processes constructing the pain have now moved from the end of the neuron and are now within the central nervous system, like upregulation. And it's incredibly common. Again, it's not saying it's all in someone's head, although to some degree all pain is in our head to some degree, but the processes have moved towards the more changes in the nervous system and changes in the immune system. We should also bring in here. And the key is too, Brad, they're treatable. So there's no need to despair, but try and get educated and understand things better. And move along with science. You know, as I said, I'm almost retired, but the changes we've seen in 40 years of research into pain's pathways, understanding pain, the treatment, realizing it's also involves the immune system, realizing it involves your gut microbiome, this big complex story of pain.
So just to recap there, David, in essence, 3 types, as you labelled it, tissue dominant type pain, you cut a finger, local tissues.
Yeah.
And on the other end of the spectrum, there's, you want to call it neuropathic pain. So
neuropathic pain. Someone might have had a severe accident, like a motorbike accident, and torn some nerves. That would be it, or some of the diseases. And then in the middle is this big group that once were really shunned in society out there. But I would say even in your running group, Brad, there would be a significant number of people who have this ongoing little bit of a buzzy, little bit of an ache, where they might have their joints cracked or all sorts of stuff, or maybe injections or whatever, but it kind of hangs on a little bit. And that's the kind of pain which we would think maybe nociplastic, which might have more contributors to it than issues at the end of the neuron, which again could be thoughts, feelings, context, a whole range of things.
And I, as an example to bring this to light, I, as a clinician, picked up a copy of one of your your most recent publication with your colleagues, once again, Lorimer Mosley and Tasha Stanton, the Knee Osteoarthritis Handbook, and it warrants a whole separate conversation in and of itself. But
it certainly does, yeah.
It's a brilliant publication. Patient galore purchased it, but I purchased it and I sat and I actually worked through the book as a patient. I've had 30 years of persistent kneecap pain, patellofemoral pain, from a junior triathlete to a 43-year-old recreational runner. And as I worked through this book, and in particular the protector meter, the DIMS and the SIMS, which we'll touch on, I sat there just with wonder around, wow, how much of a part are my thoughts, beliefs, playing a role in my knee pain experience. And as an example, I had associated the stairs at my children's school, where I dropped them off every morning of the working week, and I'd feel pain in the front of my knees, quite quite marked pain. And then I started to realize, well, that's an opportunity for me. I'm not damaging my tissues. That's an opportunity to get back to taking 2 steps at a time. And so that became a place of safety and refuge. And I now, in essence, look forward to going to those stairs every day because it's a chance to improve my knee health, not be reminded of my knee pain.
Oh, exactly, Brad. Exactly. And again, you touch on something that I'm sure we'll pick up there because listeners will be thinking, well, how do I treat these things? But in terms of the physical side, we all have a sweet zone of activity. There's always something where you can start activity which is healthy. And that classic sweet zone thinking, which we'll probably touch on in a moment too, is critical. And it might just be for somebody. Phil Collins, for example, chronic pain, well-known chronic pain, the drummer, Phil Collins, well-known, has said when he looks at his drumsticks, it can hurt. Right. And I think to Phil, God, there's got to be a way to start. There's a way to start. And it could even be just thinking of drumming, all right, as a way to get progression.
David, maybe just a brief note on the models of pain. We talk about biopsychosocial model. Many people will have heard of that. And is that still our best construct around putting a framework around pain?
It probably is, Brad, compared to just a pure biomedical model of the past, which was like as though there was a straight line from the tissues up to the brain. But the biopsychosocial model, which is looking at social constructs, which brings in context a lot, psychological constructs, of course, but never forgetting the biological constructs. The biopsychosocial model is also being advanced by lots of practitioners too, and you hear of sort of predictive processing models and other models, but they really are coming off the biopsychosocial model. But for us, it's a model that just takes us, it includes what processes might be going on in your body, but also includes what might be going on in the world, the social side, and includes what might be going on in the brain of the person suffering.
And I think as simplistic as it is, there's often beauty in simplicity. It's an easy story to share with patients experiencing pain that's causing concern to them or a threat value to them. And I think it's erroneous to think that people have that perspective unless practitioners in the field sometimes point that out, that, hey, are you financially stressed at the moment? Have you got some relational challenges? These things can all affect your pain experience. And oftentimes there's tears in the consult room. You see the lights go on and they start to realize it's not just about their sore knee, the patient, or their sore hip or their sore back.
That's right. Exactly, Brad. Exactly. We call those a dim, like a danger in me. And sometimes they hide in hard to find places. And a little bit of knowledge extracts them. Like people might not be aware that, for example, when you pick up the newspaper in the morning and sort of read the news, that what they're reading will actually impact their pain. It isn't a good read these days when you pick up the paper. That's why I tell people you should go to the Good News Network at least once a day as well too, and read about some good news.
When I sat on the plane doing this exercise, the protector meter out of the knee osteoarthritis handbook, and it can apply for any pain state, right? It's not just about knee pain. The exercise says, please list the dangers in me. So these can be things you hear, see, smell, touch, things you do, things you say, places you go, things you think and believe, people in your life, things happening in your body. And it's a little bit confronting when you actually have to sit and think about people in your life that maybe do make you tense up. And you realize that that's probably playing a part in your experience.
It is playing a part.
It is playing a part.
It could be someone at work. It could be an energy vampire out there. We all have energy vampires who come around and suck the energy out of it. And, management of these, of all these processes is important too.
I won't share who I have on my list here. There are people in my life that were DIMS versus Sims.
Keep that quiet.
But I can tell you on the Sims list are the Noi Group, Ebony Rio, and a few other notable clinical researchers like yourselves making a big difference. So the DIMS and Sims, can you just bring that to life a little bit more as a tool, David, that may help people experiencing pain?
DIMS stands for danger in me. SIM stands for safety in me. It's not something you go down to and get them deep fried. And although we all love a good dim sim on a cold night, But it's a really nice way, since we've taught this now for many years and thousands of people have used it in the feedback. It's a way to help practitioners, but also patients. You can do it yourself too, with a bit of guidance, to unpack the problem, to unpack it. All right. And I like that word, unpack. So SIMS, safety in me. So just that first category, things you hear, see, smell, taste, and touch. A DIM could be the sound of an ambulance. The DIM could be looking at something, or even the smell of burning. If you've been unfortunate enough to be involved in an accident where there was burning, the smell of burning. So these are all DIMs, but the SIMs on that same category could be just blue sky, getting out there and looking at a picture of a loved one, going into a park and finding 4 different shades of green, touching trees, get the dirt under your feet. These are all SIMs. And then they go on like the things you do. Many people just do nothing. I just wait around for the cure. But the things you do could be out there, begin to move, start to move, climb a tree, roll in the grass, all of this sort of stuff. So on it goes. And a really critical one, Brad, and I'll be quiet, is the things you say. So if we would always ask our patients to reflect on language. So some of the language they say, like, oh, I'm stuffed, I got the back of a 90-year-old, or I can't. Whereas the SIM language can be basically, I can. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to make some new flight plans and get going. All of this sort of relates in, and even what you read and hear on an X-ray or a scan. If someone says reads degenerative lumbar spine disease, that's horrible, isn't it? That would stop you moving. We and the medical profession need to put that into context. There may be age changes there, for example, which are actually quite normal. And those degenerative changes might have even made that back into quite a nice, stable platform where you can go and play bowls and do whatever you want. So the wording too is important. And it comes back to what we said at the start of this talk, Brad, the importance of context.
Gosh, that's really rich there, David. And I'll just, for recap's sake, just work backwards there. The power of language. You used an example of imaging findings or scan findings, if we want to call it that. I have great esteem, as I know you would, for our radiological medical colleagues. They're very, very impressive practitioners, highly skilled. One of the challenges I find, though, on the receiving end of that is in physiotherapy land, we're at the coalface of then interpreting that, helping the patient make sense of what matters and what doesn't. And it's, you can see how people get stuck on words, even the words tear. I wonder if we may do better with an interchangeable term, a synonym, which is strain in many instances. And you immediately see people think differently about that.
That's so right. If you look at in the knee arthritis book, wear and tear, we all have used the term wear and tear, and that's actually held people back. So, for example, in knee osteoarthritis, it's very hard to tear something unless you really go sort of crazy. And even the notion of wear, if you can find the sweet zone for knee osteoarthritis, things don't necessarily wear, they can repair, and then again, anybody who's a bit of a linguist out there will think, oh, wear and tear, they kind of rhyme. So it becomes deeply embedded. So I'd say move and lube it, or something like that, move and groove, or something, get something a little bit more zappy.
Those things stick though, don't they? And I mean, it's possibly the work of yourself and your colleagues, like the motion is lotion concept. I think that is your terminology. But
motion is lotion, yeah.
These little maxims stick, and you hear patients, I'll often quiz patients, like finish the sentence, on the fly. Finish the sentence. Motion is lotion.
Lotion. Good on you.
These little things, and it seems so simplistic, but by gosh, it can be powerful, the use of language.
Yeah, many examples come to mind. I gave one before, but I got into this language thinking years ago when a young woman came in limping with this ankle foot pain, and I said, "What's happened to you?" And she said, "Oh, I've got a collapsed arch," And I looked at the foot. It didn't look too collapsed to me. It was a bit stiff, and I gave a bit of a wriggle, a few exercises, or whatever. So I don't think you got a collapsed arch. That's a stable platform. And she came back next time and she said, I'm feeling quite a lot better with my stable platform. And, I'm not telling lies. I'm just telling her what's my best judgment truth of what's going on there.
Your best judgment truth, that you reframed it.
Judgmental truth. That's bad English, isn't it?
No. And you use the example there of shifting thinking from I can't to I can, making new flight plans.
Yeah.
And something that jumped out when I read through the Knee Osteoarthritis Handbook for me was this concept of neurotags and how our thoughts, our internal dialogue can physiologically play out in the pain we experience. And when I did my stock take, or I unpacked the problem for my knee pain, I listed out the narrative that I have in my mind, the thoughts, things that I think and I believe. I will need a knee replacement. Things will only get worse. If it's bad now at 43, wait another 10 or 20 years. I have bad knees. This is bad for my age. My leg shape has caused me this problem. I shouldn't have run as much. And so when I did the honest stock take of my internal thoughts, even as a trained health professional, and then I went on to the other side and went of the page and did my safety in me thinking, I've changed it to my knees are adaptable. Movement and load is good for my knees. My knees are robust. My knees can be pain-free. And my pain experience walking those steps at my kids' school every day has changed. And I haven't physiologically made time in my schedule to do any more gym work than what I can fit in anyway, but my thinking has changed and my pain experience has changed. Can you talk about these in science terms, I believe we call them neurotags?
Yeah, it's a word Lorimer Moseley and I brought up 25 years ago. Actually, we were walking along some street in some dodgy city and we saw this bit of graffiti written over a wall. I said, oh gosh, it's kind of like how we think the brain might work, but it's essentially a term used to cover processing which occurs in the brain. Like many listeners might have heard you only use 10% of your brain, doing certain stuff. That's been around for years, but that's basically bullshit. If we can swear on your program, when you hurt, when you move, when you think, when you do anything, your whole brain is engaged. So what we began to see from some of the research work into brain scanning, was that there were certain areas of the brain which were very regularly, frequently in action when someone was experiencing pain. And they were areas, as you'd expect, the sensation areas, but in the front, the planning areas, the stress areas down deep in the spine, the movement areas, the language areas, the visual areas, everything was alight. And so we call this pattern the neurotag. Things have advanced a lot in science still, and in the philosophy of pain and brain pain. But the concept, the broad concept that when we have a pain state or an anxiety state, multiple areas of the brain are engaged. And Brad, when we first saw that, it made me realize really key thing we're going to come to. Multiple areas of the brain are engaged. Therefore, there are multiple ways in which we can get in and start to alter pain that is just simply too much stressing, concerning somebody. I'll share this. Probably the world leader in our understanding of pain, Professor Patrick Wall. Some of the professionals might remember the gate control theory. When the first scans came out showing areas of the brain engaged, we saw that the movement areas were engaged. And Wall said, when we first saw it, we thought, wow, look at that. And then we thought, of course the movement areas are engaged when you have pain. Why? Because you have pain, you'll also be thinking, how do I move? How do I react? How do I defend? What do I do? How do I escape? So this notion of everything's involved in the pain experience. And when we've asked 300 to 400 people who had a pain state, who were treated via processes like in the Explained Pain or like in the Arthritis book, when they were asked what is the key things that helped them, one thing they said was realizing that many things come in and construct my pain. And that was one of the most powerful things. And we've already touched on this, Brad. They realized that it might have been someone or some place or something else or some feelings or thoughts. That was one of the most powerful things that people felt helped them escape their chronic pain problem.
Just that recognition that there's multiple potential drivers for their pain state.
There's multiple potential drivers, and sometimes they recognise that some of them are a bit dark and sinister. They might not want to go there, but even the recognition of that, again, it comes back to context. It almost comes back to a theme of this talk we're having.
But the upside of that is that there's multiple potential avenues to influence someone's pain state.
That's exactly right. So the realization, okay, if many things are in there constructing my pain, therefore I can do many things to actually help it. And that's powerful.
Beautiful and powerful, isn't it?
And that was from for nearly 400 people who'd been through some pain treatment work. Yep.
And I think you mentioned there were maybe 3 themes that emerged from that work. Is that correct? 3 themes. That was the first, the realization that many things can contribute to people's pain. What were the other findings, David?
All right. Well, let's go to it now, because I think this would probably be 3 some key tips to take home. There were 4 or 5 findings that people realize. First of all, that my pain does not necessarily link in to any damage I've had or any scan findings.
So pain doesn't necessarily reflect tissue damage?
That's right. Pain doesn't necessarily reflect sort of tissue damage. It's a powerful one for knee osteoarthritis too, because a lot of people with severe osteoarthritis on X-ray have about the same pain as someone who has a mild changes on pain. The second thing was many things come in and can create pain, as we've said. Therefore, many things can help my pain state. And Brad, that's so important. It's not just one thing. It's not just there's no magic exercise. There's no magic one thing. It's a matter of movement change, a matter of thinking change, a matter of clever movements, a matter of changing what you eat, a matter of a whole range of things. The fourth one is that treatment, it's better active rather than passive. So realizing that I can do more. I don't have to rely on somebody else. And it's that realization, I think, that if someone goes to a clinician, just say, once a week or twice a week, they're only there 1 or 2% of the whole week. The rest of the week is up to them. And the final thing, and this is an important one too, is that chronic pain can change. Persistent pain, I should call it, can change. And Brad, this is important for people like you getting this message out here. We are still in this country and in the world talking about managing pain. We're talking about it as though it won't change. But the data repeatedly says, systematic reviews in the Lancet just recently show, with clever talking therapies, clever movement therapies, clever adjusting drug therapies, that this thing, pain, can change. And that's the message Mosley and I colleagues would like to put out there. Change is on the cards. We're not saying it's easy, but change is on the cards. And that is a powerful step than just pure, I'm going to manage this.
Gosh, that's powerful. Change is on the cards. Pain, persistent pain, doesn't need to just be managed.
No, we've got to look at treatment and change the word treatment. I've got pain, it's treatable. It's a biological construction, pain. And everything in biology can change. Yep. Biology changes all the time. Our physiology, our biology changes. We've still got this thinking out there that, I've got pain, I've got it forever. And I'll just give you one other example. I've been involved in research with stroke pain, people with stroke. All right. And here is it's probably quite important, because 1 in 5 of us are going to have a stroke, and out of the 1 in 5, 60 to 70% of people will have pain. But nobody ever treats it. It's put under the carpet. Yet one of the big differences with people with stroke is they think it's permanent. And even the word stroke, it's permanent. I've got it. So even the word itself. So I think this often happens with, chronic back pain, permanent. Right? But no, it's a process. It's changeable. And we've just got to get better at it and get this message out there.
Yeah, gosh, that's so managing pain should shift to let's treat pain.
Let's lift our expectations of outcome and lift. And but for some people, a lift of 20% or being able to do something a little bit different could be really powerful. But we're getting increasing number of clients coming in who have really, really significant relief from something they thought they'd had forever.
You're listening to Associate Professor David Butler on this expert edition of the Physical Performance Show. Support for today's show comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to complete rehabilitation, get back to their physical best, and cross what we term the physio finish line. Our philosophy is simple. We do not wish to see you for a session more than what you require. We just want to see you get back to your physical best. To schedule your online 45-minute consultation, you can jump over to pogophysio.com.au, schedule an appointment with myself or any of the Pogo Physio team, or if you are in Southeast Queensland, schedule an in-person consultation. For now, let's jump back with this week's expert edition guest, Associate Professor David Butler, explaining pain. You use the phrase with clever talking therapies, which highlights that the reliance on people doing things for patients or people experiencing pain, whilst that may be a significant part of their journey or recovery, it has to be a shift of things that I can do as the patient versus you can do for me as the therapist at some point.
That's right,
I experienced that just yesterday with a patient who's been going through 4 months of pain with his lower back. Very typical, I would say, but to this gentleman it was representing a great threat, and he'd just come off the series of 4 injections and lots of different passive interventions. But I spent 45 minutes with him and really tried to dig a bit deeper and understand his situation and the context of his pain. And he sent a beautiful email last night just saying, thank you for taking the time. And I've got a new perspective. I shared a few resources with him. I assigned him homework. I said, you must listen to this and send me back your top learnings. And just that reflection, putting the tools back in, this gentleman's name is Chris, in Chris's hands, I think helped hopefully him shift his trajectory. So his expectations shifted now from I'm stuck with this, so I can change this. So as a working example.
Simply so true. And the notion of encouraging patients or encouraging our own group to go and reflect is important too. At my stage, I've got a technique that I will now always use, and I call it seeking achievement emotions. So if I've got somebody who is, say, starting to move a bit differently or eat a bit differently or think a bit differently, I'll say, can you stop for a moment and just reflect? You've now walked around that park. Don't just think brilliant and go and have a gin and tonic and sit down and think, wow. Take 20 seconds or so and reflect on where you've been. And I said, and then, like Brad, in anything we like to talk about, we give some science. You can have an achievement emotion. If you sit and reflect on what you've done and how you've improved a little bit better, that'll make a wonderful cascade of these wonderful happy hormones in your brain and body. So next time you do it, it'll even be easier. So that powerful thing, reflection, again, which is a psychological thing, has powerful biological effects underneath. And it's a lovely thing to do. We should all be asking patients when they come back, what did you learn? What did you take from the last visit?
That's beautiful.
And even if they just say, all I remember is motion is lotion, well, that's good.
I've just fallen into it. I try and get the consultations off to a somewhat positive note. And I say, what wins have you had since we caught up last? Sometimes you met with a little bit of a pause because people have to reflect and they haven't walked in with it ready to go. But even when they then need to unpack the things that they're challenged by or struggling with, I think it's nice that they have been able to identify that in some way they've moved forwards.
Exactly. And that's so important. But for someone who's maybe not your client in the running group, but for somebody who, like a young lady who chronic pain after a minor brain injury, I said to her, you need to get out of the house and start walking just to the back of the fence and back. And then one day I said, I now want you to run it. Just jog it. I haven't jogged for 2 years. Come on, jog it. Jog it. She came and said, I've jogged it. If you reflect, she's only done a really, really minor physical thing, but she's done an amazingly powerful rejuvenation of the whole brain, whole nervous system.
Yeah, it makes me think of a surfer I treated years ago, and I said, you can't come back until you've had a surf. I won't let you in with a smile on my face.
Yeah, that's right. Good on you, Brad.
And sometimes they're just patients, they just need a nudge,
It's a nudge.
Someone that they trust to expect more from them in the next period.
To help them do something they thought they couldn't do. Not going crazy. It's just, come on, you can take that extra few steps. I want you to lift a bit more weight when you do a deadlift, whatever it is. Come on, you can do a little bit more.
Gosh, simple but so powerful. It's easy to overlook the effect that it can have by putting it down it's just so basic. It's not meaningful, but it absolutely is meaningful.
It is meaningful. Yeah, it is meaningful. The other thing linked to this, Brad, is this just the awareness in the last 10 years of how important the immune system is in pain states and in stress states. And we said before the important thing that everything matters, the realization that everything matters. Well, that's very clearly linked into the immune system, because so many things will help the immune system and so many things will dampen it down. And we've talked about DIMS and SIMS, and you could even think of it as a balance of more inflammatory immune system, which are the DIMS, or more calming down anti-inflammatory SIMS. I tell my colleagues you're actually movement therapists, immunotherapists, endocrine therapists, performance therapists.
I think it's the reality, and I think any evolving practitioner would recognise that there's
absolutely
a lot more than goes into a consultation than we realise. Maybe that explains the fatigue at the end of a good day's work.
Fatigue at the end of a good day's work. Yeah, yes, you come out thinking...
Yeah.
Or it even explains where you've just seen 4 clients with bad backs and you come out with a bad back yourself. Yes.
And David, because I think they're so pertinent, those 4 or 5 key themes: pain doesn't equal tissue damage, realization that pain can come from many different drivers and therefore many things can help.
Yep.
Have a shift, active versus passive.
And sometimes there's nothing wrong with something passive, some guidance. I'm still very much a hands-on therapist as well as a talking therapist.
I know there's a lot of noise sometimes in our profession around hands-on and the limitations, but if it's framed in the right way with the true explanation to patients on what it does, there's nothing wrong with it, correct?
Absolutely. But I touch every patient, and to some it just might be a hand on the shoulder, so that's going to be okay. But we therapists, we really must keep our hands-on skills. You've got to be able to do a really skilled neurological examination. You've got to be able to hold someone, to guide them through movement, to show them how how they can go and do it at home, to touch areas, to explain what's going on. Yeah, it's and still occasionally I'll give someone a good sort of shake up to with their back. It's not a problem. I'm really proud of my manual therapy skills and blending them now over the last few years with more explained pain skills, and doing my best with some of the other psychological skills out there that I've managed to pick up.
If a therapist is performing some manual technique, whether it's some joint work, soft tissue work, or neurodynamic work, what do you think's a great education piece for the patient about what's actually been changed in those circumstances? David, what's Associate Professor David Butler's explanation to his patients when he's performing manual therapy?
That's a really good question. For a start, I would never really be performing manual therapy just for a pure manual therapy move something. I would have a story behind it. Okay, look, I'll use my own story. I had a nerve root problem last year, an L3 nerve root problem, and interestingly, it was driving me mad. I didn't quite know what was going on for a while until it caused pain to my knee. And I was even thinking, oh gosh, maybe I need an injection or something or whatever. But I finally got control of it myself and said, okay, what do I do for this? So I said, okay, I'm waking up at 2 o'clock every morning, and I happen to know the immune system goes through this diurnal thing. All right. So there's inflammation. I had an MRI. It's showing inflammation and some compression at the L3 nerve root exit. All right. But I said to myself, okay, Dave, you should know a bit about this. You wrote the bloody book on it. Come on, fix your bloody self. And so I said, okay, I know that the nerve root where it emerges out of the foramen only takes up 1/3 of the space. And I also know that it can adapt and even be ribbons. So I can adapt. Secondly, I thought, okay, this is going to be, there's inflammation there. It's showing up. What changes inflammation? I cut back the booze for a while. I got on the really nice food. I thought, okay, and I'm going to have a positive approach. This is going to come out, right? And then thirdly, I'm going to do my own manual therapy on this. So it's L3. So I devised this series of, and for the first time in my life, I did the exercises. I got on my knees and I was bending back and doing prone knee bends and all this sort of stuff. I'm going to do this on the hour, all right? And I'm just going to lie down, do it, bit of heat, whatever. And I was doing these manual movements, and one night at 2 o'clock, I said, something's moved. It hurt like hell, but just I can move a little bit better. And I reckon I might have jiggled that nerve a little bit and got it sort of going. And now, Brad, I could do anything I want. No fear, no problems, and it's away. So it's a long answer to it, but I'll do manual therapy, but I will have a story with it. If I'm there wriggling someone's neck joints, which I'd be quite happily doing, I'll be in there saying, look, it's a bit tight in there, but as you know, it's tight for quite a few reasons, whatever, but here's how you loosen it up yourself. Plus, can you change those other things that we've identified as well too? Yeah. The old forward head posture, I'll make these stronger, I'll make these longer, but I will say to that person, let's try and work out why your head's gone there, all right? And that, for example, brings in the neurodynamics. Are you trying to sort of slacken some of the system, a bit of sort of sensitivity elsewhere, or are you really just trying to avoid the world to some degree and creeping down here into your body? Don't let the old person in, come back out and up.
Yeah, brilliant. So it's sharing a story, shifting, still with that construct of shifting from reliance on the passive modalities to I can do this as the patient.
You're never giving up your skills. They're there, but, Brad, I used to do a lot of manipulating, and I would still, manipulate. But now if I ever do it, it's a really judicious act. It's rarer. It's don't want people to get hooked on or hooked on me or addicted to me, where they come in for the pushing or come in for the needles or whatever. That point 4, when people realizing active rather than passive, is a key thing.
And then the 5th point there, just to recap, pain can change. We need to lift our expectations, not just manage pain, but let's treat pain and let's change it.
Let's change it. And the 3 key portals are that increased knowledge. Moving and loading is critical, of course. And then the 3rd pillar, we call it resetting your protection systems. And it's all kind of linked. So the protection systems of the sympathetic, the endocrine, the motor, even language, to dampen everything down.
So they're the big 3 levers: increase knowledge, move more, move and load, and reset the protection meter.
Reset the protection meter, yep, absolutely. Moving and loading, you guys are experts at that sort of world. We will have a framework where the whole moving and loading, the physical side of things, can go back to left-right discrimination, to imagining movements, to thinking of movement, which in some really people with severe pain states, even thinking of movement can hurt, and then into actual movements, and then into goal-specific movements. And in our more chronic pain groups, we make sure when they're starting to move that they do something which is loading, which is holding weights or whatever. If I squeeze my finger together, that's loading. But then there's also movement as well too, so that we try and get those two into it before we get back to functional or occupational demanding movement.
And language, which I'm pretty sure has come from yourself and your colleagues' work there at the NOI group around graded exposure. That's a term we hear in clinical practice amongst professionals, but for the patient, what does that mean in simple terms?
If you think about it, Brad, and since you say it, it's a horrible word, graded exposure. Does it mean taking your clothes off slowly or something?
Not on this interview.
No, graded activity, graded activity. It's interesting you say that, because we don't use that word so much these days. We use the sweet zone.
Sweet zone.
Yeah. So it's finding your sweet zone of activity, which will be different for everybody, but enough movement or enough activity or thinking about that particular movement at that particular time, which makes them change, which could have been you looking at the stairs with your patellofemoral pain. So there's a sweet zone. And then, of course, that sweet zone can change. And basically you can do more, all right, or you can do it in different contexts. Or, said again, if there's a certain activity that you can find that you can do, no matter what it is, you could add DIMS to it to make it harder. So do it with someone you don't like, do it in a place where you've had a bad sporting result, or add Sims, right, to make it easier. So again, that's changing context. And that's essentially graded exposure, changing your sweet zone, moving it along, aided by context.
And hopefully lifting the ceiling or widening out that bandwidth.
Lifting the ceiling, yep.
Beautiful. David, in the final moments here, just something that I know yourself in your work you've been passionate about espousing is that we don't have pain receptors, we have danger receptors. Could you just very briefly, because I know we're closing in on time, just quickly explain the difference?
The majority teaching has always been that there are pain endings, and that's a commonly used word. Pain endings at the end of neurons. So when you hit your finger with a hammer or something, the pain endings start the pain and it goes up. That's not true. There are no pain endings. There's no such thing as a pain ending. What happens when you do some damage, whether it's chemical or too hot or too cold or hit with a hammer, is that nerve endings called nociceptors fire and open up and send a danger signal up to the brain. Now, depending on context again, that danger signal then might be integrated into a pain construction. Right? So if something's happened down here and you're doing something you really love or you don't know about it, obviously it hasn't come in and constructed pain. We've all looked at our hands and found a splinter, or you've had a wild night out and you've seen a bruise somewhere and you think, where'd that bruise come from, or where'd that splinter come from? So what would have happened there would have been nociception, so danger messages coming in still, but because the context has changed, it didn't go any further. It's an important thing, Brad, because there are no pain endings. Therefore, if people are always seeking to treat pain by doing something at the end of the neuron, then they'll be missing the big picture, which is, again, part thoughts, feelings, behaviours, context, as well as issues in the tissues down there. So there aren't any pain pathways anyway. Just like there's no love endings, just like there's no love pathways. It's constructed in the brain, in the body.
It's an important concept, though, because I think it really helps to bring this full circle where that nociception's happening all the time. We are
happening all the time.
We're sensing, responding to our environment. But crikey, if everything that triggered nociception caused pain, we wouldn't get out of the house, would we?
That's right. I'm sitting in this chair now, and there'd be nociception coming from my bottom up here, but I'm not having any pain. Talking to you is so interesting, Brad. But if I sat here all day, there might be a few aches and pains. Or, now that I've even talked about it, I'm feeling I've wriggled my bottom a little bit. Sort of
me too. No, that's great.
So there's just to summarise that there are no pain endings and there are no pain pathways. And the best way to conceptualise it is that there are danger endings and danger pathways going up, which, depending on context, the brain might integrate into a pain defence, pain construction.
David, every guest of the show across the 360 plus episodes to date.
Good on you, Brad. Well done.
Oh, it's been a big 7 or 8 years, but it is very thrilling and rewarding when you hear that people's experience with conditions have changed with a little bit of knowledge that they may have in some way been impacted from this program. But every guest gets issued 2 set questions, David. And the first is, if David Butler, Associate Professor David Butler, with all his years of accrued experiences and professional knowledge, had to boil everything he's learned into one top tip, just one single piece of advice, it's very difficult, I know, to help people experiencing pain, what would that solitary piece of advice be? And I know it's an impossible question, but that's the beauty of it.
That's an impossible question, Brad, and that's the beauty of it. I should be reflecting on that even more. Lift expectations of outcome. Challenge yourself. Lift expectations of outcome. Because the data is out there. Our understanding of the changeability of the pain experience is out there. Join the revolution. Lift expectations of outcome.
So powerful. I'm going to, I think, write that on a piece of paper and stick it on my consult room door. When people walk in, they can see it.
Yep. Good on you.
Lift expectations of outcome. It's beautiful. So powerful.
Yeah, we should do. There's everything's out there saying, but there's also for clinicians too who might be stuck. And I find, just briefly, Brad, in my clinical life, where I've gone on and I can probably pick 4 or 5 patients over the last 40 years who've made me think, lift expectations of outcome from what they can do, but linking into the beautiful science which we need to tap into that shows this changeability. Yeah, lift expectation of outcome. I hope that makes sense.
And David, the other set question is, every guest issues a physical challenge for the week to listeners. So this show is called the Physical Performance Show. What's Associate Professor David Butler's physical challenge to our listeners going to be for the week?
The physical challenge, all right? Basically, do something you thought you couldn't do. Or maybe it's, have you got a painful movement? See if you can work out a way to move that same movement so it doesn't hurt. Is there a way you can do it? Does it hurt bending over? All right. Then what happens if you bend over lying on your back and pulling your knees up on your chest? That's bending over. What happens if you bend over in the chair? What happens if you try bending over watching something funny or whatever? Is there a way that you can make that movement that you've learned hurts? Can you do it in a different context and in a different way? Is there some way you can do it, right? So your neck hurts turning to the right, okay? Instead of turning to the right, can you think of, put your chin on your shoulder rather than turning your head this way? Can you lift your shoulders up and turn in a safe position? Can you lie on your back and move like this? Can you look at the tennis and imagine you're watching tennis? Can you put a pen on your nose and draw, I am getting better on the mirror and know that it doesn't hurt? Is there a way in which you can take a movement, play with it, explore that it doesn't hurt? Because there nearly always will be a way that movement won't hurt.
Yeah, gosh. So take that challenge on, and that's exciting. And I'm going to add to my repertoire of intervention tools, David, off the back of this talk, to suggest that some patients might benefit from rolling down hills in the grass and climbing trees.
Rolling down the hills, yes. Take your shoes off, get a little bit of mud between your toes now that it's raining, and enjoy that, yes.
David, there's so much out there that you've contributed to in terms of resources, but I'll point in the show notes to obviously some of these key resources. But is there anything in particular you want to put a spotlight on? I know that we're back looking at a two-day conference, I should say. I think it's March 2025 in Melbourne.
March 2025 in Melbourne. No, Brad, you've introduced some of our material. The Neuro group, we are a bit of an odd group in that when we produce a book, we like to have randomized controlled trials behind it rather than just sort of produce it. So the knee osteoarthritis book is out. Very soon, the low back pain book will be out. So that's based on the Resolve trial, which was in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, which showed that a combination of skill, movement, loading, knowledge, information, resetting protection systems actually really helps in chronic pain. Interesting that it's been picked up in the United States. Of course, we have the huge problems over there and here with opioids and fentanyl, people seeking the passive approach or guided to it when there is another approach, which is certainly nowhere near addictive, but incredibly powerful. So the low back pain book will be out later in the year, and also a little manual for complex regional pain syndrome, which might not affect your running group, but the back pain group will be bringing all of this out. So the trials are done, so we feel confident in presenting that information now to the public. So keep it on the Neuro group.
Yeah, it's so rich. And I often suggest to patients as they leave the room, like, I'll send them a link. I'll try and remove the barrier of them taking action to order a resource or to listen to something or to watch something.
Yeah.
And I'll often just send the link and say, please, and I know for yourself and your colleagues, you don't write books to sail to the Bahamas. You write books to get the knowledge out there. It's a mission.
Get the knowledge out there, yeah.
And I'll say, please spend $35. This will be the best $35 you'll spend on your knee osteoarthritis journey. Please get the book and do it and bring it back in and show me. And so I think it's key that we try and remove barriers as we get resources in front of patients. So I'm really looking forward to the lower back pain book. Hopefully see you in March 2025. Thank you for stopping by the show.
Might up to warm Queensland and warm up, I think.
Yeah. Roll down the hills. Thank you again, David.
All the best, and all the best to your listeners. And Brad, thanks for the great work you're doing disseminating quality information out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. So there you have it. another episode of the Physical Performance Show. It's been a while, but that one is in the books. I trust and I know you enjoyed David Butler's share-ins. I, for one, was excited to get the opportunity to record this episode with David. I recall being introduced to his works early in my undergraduate physiotherapy degree and being quite mesmerised by the Explain Pain book. And if you haven't yet seen it, jump over, check it out online. It is a beautifully illustrated book that just stands out, even 25 years on. If you're yet to follow David and his team over at the NOI Group, jump over to @NOI Group on Instagram or visit noigroup.com online. There you can find the newly released Knee Osteoarthritis Handbook. And no doubt, as I am, many of you will probably be excited to get your hands on the upcoming lower back pain book that David referenced. As David mentioned, the NOI Group is hosting the NOI Episode 3 2025 conference in Melbourne in March. You can register for that over on the NOI website as well. If you'd like to follow along the Pogo Physio journey, you can jump over to @PogoPhysio on the socials or provide any feedback for the show to myself directly @Brad_beer, or you can reach me via email b.beer@pogophysio.com.au. As always, a big thank you to the team who make this show possible: Daryl Misson, audio engineering, Susan Wilkin, show administration, Milan Borrow, videography, and Matthew Oldin, our esteemed graphic designer. So until next episode, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.